Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In a week when the government has been reprimanded for letting foreign criminals out of prison without proper checks or safeguards, has been found to have watched a firm due to build thousands of prison places go bust 18 months ago and do absolutely nothing, and ended short-term sentences, allowing criminals like prolific shoplifters to escape prison, it is beyond disappointing that today it seeks to overturn perfectly sensible amendments made in the House of Lords. Amendments to make the criminal justice system more transparent and giving victims stronger rights to challenge unduly lenient sentences. So we have to ask, why is this government so afraid of the public? Why do ministers not trust the people? Why do they want to keep injustice, from the rape gangs to the serious criminals, getting away with a few brief years in prison out of the spotlight? They sigh and they moan when I raise the rape gangs. This is exactly the mentality the country is sick of, and lay behind the failure to prosecute those cases. Madam Deputy Speaker, we support Lord's Amendment 2 on expanding the Victims' Code for murder, manslaughter and infanticide abroad. We support Lord's Amendment 4 to remove Clause 12 from the bill because it will deliver few savings while undermining access to justice. And we support Amendments 5 and 6, which strengthen the unduly lenient sentence scheme. Amendment 5 introduces an exceptional circumstances clause that allows the deadline to be extended beyond 28 days. And Amendment 6 requires the Justice Secretary to ensure victims and their families are aware of their rights under the scheme. These are welcome suggestions, and I want to pay tribute to Katie Brett and the rest of Justice for Victims and to Tracy Hanson for their campaigning on this front. They've been consistent in making clear that they want meaningful change and not half measures. Just last week, I wrote to the Attorney General about the case of Mohammed Abdul Razik, who dragged a 5-year-old girl off the street so he could sexually assault her. He was sentenced to only 11 years in prison, and in all probability, he will be out in just 7. Monsters like him need to be kept away from children. The government's opposition to these amendments weakens justice and reduces public protection. I heard what the Minister said about looking at legislation in the future, and we will hold her to those words. Madam Deputy Speaker, the failure to trust the people goes not just for the unduly lenient sentence scheme, but wider transparency in the justice system. And it's to this that I want to direct the rest of my remarks. Because on this side of the House, we do trust the people. And so we support Lord's Amendment 1, which entitles victims to free transcripts of route to verdict and bail decisions. And we support Lord's Amendment 3, which requires the publication of Crown Court transcripts of judges' sentences remarks online and for free within 14 days of request made by any member of the public. The Minister for Victims explained the government's position on these amendments, and amid the verbiage, I could discern only excuses. She sounded like the driver of a broken-down train, with passengers stranded miles from the nearest station, doing her best to assure everyone on the train that it was indeed moving. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course everyone knows that there isn't any movement. The train we are on is entirely stationary. And this is an important lesson for the Honourable Lady, as indeed it is for other members of this government. The repetition of fiction does not make something fact. We can all see exactly what is and what is not happening. I want to explain why this is so important. Of course, we want to see how the provisions of the Sentencing Act are implemented, but it's simply not acceptable for victims to be charged as much as £7,000 for a transcript. And it's vital that we allow transparency to make it easier for victims, for journalists, for the wider public to see what is going on in our courts and detect patterns. Because we know from too many tragedies and too many cover-ups that sunlight is always the best disinfectant. Take the courts desk scandal. When the Justice Secretary tries to shut down this vital, searchable archive of court hearings, he caused an outcry. Before Courts Desk, official court listings matched reality just 4.2% of the time. 2/3 of courts routinely heard cases the media never knew about. From crimes committed by illegal immigrants in asylum hotels to weak sentences for paedophiles, from the people dragged through the courts for breaking lockdown rules years after the pandemic, to offending by convicted criminals who should have been tagged but were not, Court's Desk helped journalists to join the dots, securing justice for victims and exposing failures in policy. I still want to know why the Justice Secretary wanted to delete this archive. And I want to know why ministers blamed Court's Desk for a serious data breach when documents released since show that the MOJ considered the breach low risk and not worthy of a referral to the Information Commissioner. The Minister can explain if she wishes. I will be willing to intervene.
Of course, yes. Yeah, happily. I will happily give way.
Protocol is that the other member would want to intervene, but I take the encouragement, and the Minister rose to it as well, so well done to the Shadow Justice Secretary. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Courts Just specifically, the Shadow Secretary of State will know that this is a private company providing a subscription-based specialist data platform that provides specialist services to journalists. It is aggregating magistrates' court data. This was not stopping data sharing with Courts Desk at all. This was not about reducing transparency. This was merely a commercial sensitivity proposal that was taken temporarily offline whilst we were determining new contracts. This was not regarding transparency.
Must be short. Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think she's been taking lessons from the Prime Minister. That answer might as well have been reading the phone book rather than answering the question. I don't think we are. Well, the answer the Minister just gave was completely unsatisfactory. There was an attempt to delete the archive. I will certainly give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. I wonder if he agrees with me that if there was no intention to delete any data, why was it that the chairman of the Justice Affairs Select Committee, with the support of that committee, wrote to the Lord Chancellor asking him to stop the deletion of that data?
Well, that is indeed a very good point. I mean, the Minister has her side of the argument. On the other side of the argument is the Justice Select Committee, pretty much every journalist involved in crime and court reporting, the company involved, and opposition parties of all colours. So I think we know what is going on. I was relieved, Madam Deputy Speaker, that after the Conservative campaign to save Court's Desk, the Justice Secretary did in fact bottle it and back down. He should do the same today and back Amendments 1 and 3. The lack of transparency in our criminal justice system explains some of the darkest moments in our history. The crimes of the rape gangs were despicable, racially and religiously aggravated, with victims targeted because of their vulnerability. And the criminals were not just the rapists, but all those who colluded and were complicit in these depraved, sustained attacks. The police officers, the social workers, the local officials and the councillors. Some were guilty because they abused those poor girls themselves, some because they helped others to abuse them, and some because they had the chance to stop it but refused to do so. Some were motivated by malice, and some because they chose to tolerate evil because they didn't want to challenge the official narrative about diversity and multiculturalism. With the rape gangs and with other acts of corruption and criminality, we know the politics of communalism is so often lurking. In parts of our country, clan culture is corrupting our public institutions and the rule of law itself. As we saw in the West Midlands recently, the authorities chose not only to turn a blind eye, but to make themselves the willing tools of those they should confront. And if we want to confront all these things, if we want to save our country from corruption and ruin, we need victims of crime, journalists and campaigners and the general public to be given the information they need to expose the truth. We need government not to hinder this noble cause, but to use its power to ensure justice is done. That's why we need far more transparency in the justice system, and why today we will vote in favour of Lord's Amendments 1 and 3. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister has told us that the government will not support any of these Lord's amendments. However well reasoned, however thought through, and however well scrutinised, the response of this government to 3 months of consideration in the House of Lords is to overturn every single change their lordships have recommended. The changes to the bill made in the other place would deliver more transparency and more access to justice for victims, They would give charities and victims abroad more support. They would give victims the power to ensure sentences are fairer. They would show to anybody with an interest what is happening in our courts. They would help journalists and others to join the dots and expose the patterns of criminality and failures to enforce the law. But this government refuses them all. Without transparency, Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no accountability, and without accountability, there can be no justice. This is something we understand, and it's something those on the benches opposite would do well to understand too. We will vote to support the Lord's amendments this evening, and so should they.